Welcome to the Busted Fighters Repaired Daily podcast. On Busted Fighters, we discuss sports medicine topics important to MMA athletes, their doctors, therapists, trainers, and coaches. Our guests tell their story of recovery from a specific injury, what worked for them, what didn't, and why. I'm your host, Matt Colby. I'm a chiropractic sports physician, and I focus on the problems MMA athletes run into during training, fight camps, and competition. Today, I'm here with my friends Tom Ullman and Matt Andrade, and our very special guest, Jordan Johnson. Jordan was 4-0 in the UFC, and he left to go to the PFL. We talked a little bit about that, and then we talked a lot about how he stays healthy through a PFL season. So here it is, our podcast with Jordan Johnson. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, Jordan, so on the podcast here, we talk a lot about sports injuries and the things that fighters can do for themselves and their doctors and therapists can look out for and do to supplement their training. But before we get into that, I want to ask you a question that you told me you get a lot, which is, after 4 wins in the UFC, why did you leave? Why did you leave the UFC and go to Professional Fighters League?
Money. So I love the UFC. I had a great time in the UFC. It was a childhood dream come true. I wanted to fight in the UFC since I think I was in middle school, 8th grade, 7th grade or 8th grade. So my time in the UFC, I loved it. I appreciate the UFC for, giving me my time.
Yeah.
Yep. But it came down to money. Mm-hmm. So, I have a family, and I was wanting to make more money. And so I was going into my 4th fight, and I was 3-0, and I got an offer, and I thought I was worth more. And so I decided to fight out my contract, and then that put me into free agency, and I started, kind of shopping around, and the PFL, gave me a great deal that I couldn't say no to. And then plus with the PFL, the $1 million payout at the end of the year, if you win the whole thing, that was a chance I wanted to, that was something I wanted to chase and pursue. And, the contract outside of it was a really nice deal outside of the $1 million. So it just made sense to go there. Big challenge, big reward. So that's why I chose to go with the PFL, and I love the PFL.
Was it more like the PFL offering you a better contract, or were you using like an agent? Was an agent like a big part of it, or was it more just like you talking to them and working it out?
A little bit of both. So, in MMA, almost everybody has a manager, and basically just a broker to get you the the best deal that they can get. But the PFL, it's a smaller organization, and I know a lot of the people with the organization and knew them, before I signed, and so I was able to have, some direct dialogue with them, and, so it, that's one thing I really loved about the PFL. The UFC is such a huge machine. You're kind of, you're out of the loop on a lot of this stuff, and most managers are too. And so with the PFL, it's more of like a mom and pop shop. It's on a huge platform, same platform as the UFC, but you can have these more personal. They have a smaller roster, and you can have a more personal relationship with the staff. And it's just I felt comfortable with them, and I really felt like I was a part of it. And they got behind me, and I got a lot more marketing than I had in the rest of my career. And I was in fighting. You only get paid when you fight, and so there's a lot. You go months and months without any income. And the PFL really took care of me. They gave me a nice signing bonus, and I was trying to figure all these things out. So without even having a fight, they took care of me. And even with everything going on right now, the next season got scratched. And
yeah, with COVID-19, the PFL was actually one of the first sports organizations to say, hey, we're suspending the season. And 2020, we'll see you in 2021, and we'll do PFL season 3, I believe, in 2021. Yep. So what do you do in the downtime?
Train, and I've started a side venture, and back to like the PFL, like treating their fighters, great. They decided to look out for our safety, scratch the season, and the fighters that they kept on, they're giving us a monthly stipend to help out. And I don't think there's any, there's no other organization doing that, helping out, their fighters like that. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about like Major League Baseball right now, and their talks about a shortened season and stuff like that. Like baseball players are talking about getting their full contract or getting nothing, and the PFL is at least helping you guys now versus later, because it's now when you need it. Settling things out later is nice, but when you need dough, you need it in a timely manner. So that's great they do that. What else do they do different, like PFL versus UFC, like regarding like, well, we know the gloves are different, right? A lot of people talk about how the gloves are different from UFC to Bellator, and a lot of people say they like Bellator's gloves better because it protects your hand better. What are PFL's gloves actually like?
I think the PFL gloves are pretty similar to the UFC's gloves. I didn't notice a difference. I'm actually, when I get home, I'm gonna have to try to figure this out. Right. If there's a difference. But the Bellator, I have heard that a lot. A lot of Bellator fighters who went from the UFC to Bellator, they love Bellator gloves. Yeah. So,
well, they think that it's more padded, or there's more of like this curve or horn around the fourth and fifth knuckle, and it should protect your hand more from boxer's fracture, or what people call a barroom fracture sometimes.
I mean, MMA gloves, they're stiff and hard, and they're not they're not gentle on your hands. Like I'm pretty fortunate. I've never broke anything in my hands, because I get done with fights and I'm a wrestler, so I spend a lot of time on top and throwing a lot of punches from the side. So I'm punching with my thumb, and there's barely anything to protect your thumb in those gloves. So I get done with my fights, and my thumbs will be purple for a couple weeks afterwards. And
in MMA, fighters break their first metacarpal. The metacarpal is the long bones in your hands. The first one's your thumb, and they break that a lot.
Okay.
People get confused a lot between boxer's fractures and what we call a barroom fracture. And there's a little bit of overlap, because lots of times fighters break their hand and they come in and they feel like their x-ray report is wrong. They're like, no, it says I have a boxer's fracture. This is a barroom fracture. People ask that all the time. But technically, and these are nicknames for metacarpal fractures, but in MMA, because the glove leaves your hand free, just like if you were doing Muay Thai and you had a bad wrap job, that thumb's hanging out there and you could break it easy. Yeah. Any fracture of the metacarpals can be called a boxer's fracture, just because you do it generally with punching. But metacarpals 1 and 2 behind your first and second knuckle, it's hard to break those, right? Because when you throw a solid straight punch, the force goes into those metacarpals, then into your radius, and then up into your humerus, so you can dissipate the force, or disperse the force. With metacarpals 3 or 4 and 5, which everyone's had a friend that's punched something silly and broken that. Those bones are thinner, and they're not lined up with the radius. They're kind of out there doing their own thing. Okay. So there's nowhere for the force to go. So, and if you punch like with and you have any break in the wrist and things go downward, it invites that bone to break, upward dorsally. So typically, like when people go to the emergency room with one of those, it'll say boxer's fracture, no matter where it is, right? Okay. But the point they try to make with some texts that say a fracture of the last 2 metacarpals is a barroom fracture is because you'd think of a sloppy punch, like not a good jab or cross, but a big looping right hand, like someone emotional and stuff. So in like a street fight, you'd expect that to break. You can break any of them, but it's a lot tougher.
Even though I'm in a high level fight, I'm still going to get a barroom fracture.
You could, yeah. And they think of that, like in terms of good punches, but of course in MMA, anything could happen, right? So big looping right hands, like Jordan has a 79-inch wingspan, right? Yeah. And you have big, wide hands. Have you ever broken your hands, like fighting?
No, not that I'm aware of. Right. I know in wrestling in high school, I've been pretty fortunate not to have any like serious injuries, I feel like, in sports. But I broke my thumb, but it wasn't like a full break. It was a fractured chip, bone chip. That's the worst thing I've ever had happen to my hands.
That's good. Yeah. That's good. Yeah, some of the and there's actually some texts now that they'll call that barroom fracture, the fracture of the fourth and fifth, they'll call it a street fighter's fracture. Okay. So some people will say, boxer's fracture covers all, but boxer's fracture these 2, street fighter's fracture these 2. It's rare, but I've seen it in some like European medical journals and stuff, and I like their nicknames, so you can pick whatever you like. I like that one better because it delineates between the first 2 and the second 2.
Just improper punching.
Yeah.
What about slap boxing?
I don't know. No? Remains to be seen. So we were talking a little bit about the injuries you've had over the last year or two. Tell us the story about what happened with your elbow.
Yeah, so my elbow, still not positive what happened. It was right before my fight with Maxim, my first fight with Maxim. I was training hard, and I woke up and my elbow was huge. So hopefully we can get the photo of it. And,
you sent me a picture of it. Yep.
Yeah, so it was massive, but it was right before a fight. I had a few weeks left before the fight, and I thought it was a bursitis because I had a heavy pad session the night before, and it was like kind of sore after that, and the next morning it was super swollen and had like a lot of fluid in it, and a couple of the guys at the gym were looking at it, and half the guys were like, yeah, that's just bursitis.
Mm-hmm.
It's not much you can do for it. You just got to rest it. And then a couple of the other guys were like, you got to be careful with that. It could be infected. It could be an infection. So I just went to a clinic and kind of told them who I was, what I was doing, looked at it, let them give a diagnosis. They were like, well, we can. I think they drew some fluid, and we're like, we have to test this. And it's going to take a while to figure it out. We're just going to kind of take the shotgun approach. You need to take these antibiotics, and you need to do this kind of rest and rehab for your elbow. And so I took the antibiotics, and I basically finished out the camp with one arm and just did the best I could to train, and didn't use it on the pads. It was just real gentle with it with my training, and I never actually followed up because it didn't really matter.
Right. It got better.
And it got better, and so that was a struggle. And the thing about PFL is it's a they talk about how wrestlers do well in the PFL because it's a season format. And so like in these other organizations, if you have an injury and you can say, I'm not going to fight, let's reschedule the fight, and they'll rebook it, and it's not a huge deal. Like, you can take care of yourself. But in the PFL, if you go all the way to the finals, you have 5 fights in like just under 7 months, and you have to fight all of them because in the first 2 fights it's to score points to get into the tournament. So if you don't take one of those fights, then you only have 1 fight to score the points. And so like the PFL is super challenging because you're not just taking 1 fight, and if something goes wrong, you can scratch it. Like you have to get in that cage 5 times.
Just the grind of the season, like you think of with the NFL. It's the grind of the season that spoils a season for a team sometimes.
Yeah.
The injuries they sustained over the season.
And I had a lot. I was pretty beat up this whole year, and so for me it was, that was kind of the challenge, like navigating, because you got to stay training the whole year, and you got to, like I said, you have to get in the cage, or you're not gonna. Your season's over, and so it was. For me, it was an experience dealing with all these injuries and being so banged up and trying to navigate this new territory of got to be in the best shape, got to be as strong, as healthy as I possibly can, and get in make this work. It was a learning experience for sure.
That's wild. It's good that you were that cautious with the elbow, and your teammates informed you too, because like last week we had Aaron Simpson in, and he was talking about a really similar situation where he had an infection like with his nose and lip, and he thought he broke his nose, and he had ongoing elbow problems anyway. So his elbow started swelling up, so he thought he had a problem with his elbow, and turned out he had a staph infection, and he was super lucky. One of his teammates told him, "No, you've got an infection. You have to go someplace."
Yep.
Because one thing we hit on last week with Aaron was for wrestlers and fighters, here's a sort of a dangerous little triad that everyone's flirting with. Communicable diseases, right? Skin stuff and infections and stuff. So you got that to play with. But now it gets compounded by, that tough wrestler's attitude, like we were talking about earlier. That, just thinking things are going to get better and not maybe waiting longer than a lot of other people do because there's so many daily little injuries.
Yep.
But also what I like to call phantom injuries. Like you ever come home from practice and you have a broken toe or broken finger, and you didn't even know till hours later you were hurt.
Yep.
When you take those 3 things together, it's easy for a wrestler or MMA fighter to dismiss something or wait a little longer.
Yep.
But with someone like you who knew that infection is in the game, it's good that you did that right away.
Yeah.
With bursitis, when you get bursitis, like a bursa is a fluid-filled sac, and you have a few places where you have them in your body, and the job of the bursa is to reduce friction of soft tissue. So tendons, muscles, even your skin, it's to reduce the friction of those soft tissues sliding over bony prominences. So obviously there's one right at the point of your elbow at the end of your olecranon, so we call it Olecranon Bursitis, right? And one of the things to look out for is like when you have bursitis, it's like you have some weird swelling in there and your skin kind of feels loose, right? It's not just swollen like if you twist an ankle or your knee swells up. It's a little different. So that's where you start thinking bursitis, but one of the things that should be a red flag that says this could be an infection is heat and redness, right? If you think you have some bursitis going on, because it's obvious how wrestlers and fighters can get bursitis, or even students like who sit with their elbow on a desk all the time, they get bursitis too. But one of the things you're looking out for is heat and redness, because that could be an infection.
Yeah. It again, I don't know exactly which it was, if it was an infection or the bursitis, but it was painful when I would hit that like on the mat, because I try to be as careful as possible whenever my elbow would ding the mat, or if I jerked it the wrong way. It was actually,
and you can get an infection, not just through like Aaron did, where he had a systemic infection going on, but a bug bite. Bugs tend to, mosquitoes and stuff tend to bite you on the elbow. People get it from that, or even just a scrape. You get a fingernail scratch wrestling, and think you coincidentally banged your elbow on something, and it could be infection. So if it's infection, you don't have to be suspecting a big systemic infection, or you cut yourself and it's obvious. It could be something super small. Treating bursitis is tough, because it basically comes down to rest, right? And in your case, they did antibiotic just in case. But one of the things that's really helpful, the first thing is you got to pad that thing up, because just your activities of daily life, getting in and out of the car, you might bang it on the refrigerator and stuff and set yourself back. Because once that thing's flared up, it wants to flare up again. But one of the things that helps a lot is laser therapy. And there's a bunch of different kinds of laser, but cold laser is typically a class 3B laser, and class 4 laser, which is a little better, but it does generate a little bit of heat maybe. Those lasers can be helpful with things like that, where you can't really treat it with, say massage therapy and exercises, and even ultrasound can be a little too much because you're irritating it more. But the good thing about laser is you can hit anything with it, and you don't really usually have to worry about hurting somebody with it.
What is it doing?
Basically, we're sending photons of light energy into the tissue, kind of like ultrasound, right? Ultrasound therapy has been the sports med tool of choice for, 40 years. And that's shooting sound waves into a tissue to stimulate the tissue, increase its metabolic capacity, make it heal faster, right?
Sounds like Star Trek.
A little, yeah, kind of.
What do you think about red light?
Which one? The one that's called just red light therapy?
Red light and the near infrared light.
Isn't that the sauna?
Oh, infrared.
That's what I want to know about.
Yeah. That's good for like whole body recovery. And it's one of those things that was popular and kind of on the fringe, and then it wasn't, and then a lot of people swear by it, and it's coming up again. I need to learn a little bit more about that.
Okay.
The thing with laser is tough, because like the laser we use at the clinic, it was super expensive. I had to wait a couple of years before I could even have a chance at financing one out to get one, even though I really wanted it. And but then there's lasers out there you could get, different types of red light therapy and stuff that are, extremely inexpensive. And some things work better than others. Just like vitamins and supplements or anything else. There's the good version, and then there's the sort of tag along version.
Why is it called cold laser?
So cold laser doesn't do anything cold. It just they nicknamed it cold laser because it doesn't generate heat. Because the issue with working with lasers is, what if you heat something up, right? Okay. So the cold laser, a class 3B laser, you can shine that on something forever, and it's not going to generate any heat, or very, 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 very small amounts. So the reason that was so popular with sports teams, like at one point all sports teams had a cold laser, and it was popular is because anyone can use it, and any of the trainers or anybody can work with an athlete with it, and it's not going to hurt anything. The little bit stronger laser, class 4 laser, we got to watch out for a couple things, including tattoos. If you hit a tattoo with it, like you melt the tattoo instantly. You get an instant burn, right?
Yeah.
And you can't even really, with the class 4 laser, like at the clinic, I keep that separate so only I can grab it, because basically, even if you get within an inch or a centimeter, like I don't even chance it. I won't get within 2 inches of a tattoo, because as the light goes into your skin, it's strong. It's really strong, and it gets through your skin into the tissue, but we lose a lot of it in the skin. You know, our skin is very efficient at grabbing light. And what will happen is you shoot it into the skin, your skin grabs that light and starts to disperse it, and you hit the tattoo from the back end. And you get a scar, like it gets bubbly. It's awful. I've seen it.
Wow.
We've never had that happen, but I've seen it. I've seen it happen to people, not in person, and it's something to avoid. But laser therapy it's great in a lot of ways because you can do it when you can't do anything else. You know, like say someone has metal implants and you can't ultrasound, you go right to laser. So some clinics only do laser now. Some stick with ultrasound. Some do both. I like to do a lot of both. And but for bursitis especially, it's good because it's tricky treating bursitis because anything you do to it, you might irritate it more. So time is the biggest thing. Time and not banging it on anything, which is incredibly hard once you have that. To not, you know, like the phrase sticking out like a sore thumb. Once you hurt something, it seems like you keep banging it on stuff.
Like with with professional fighters, it's amazing to me that they don't have, every time you get off the mat, somebody checking you out. Because, I mean, they're investing in you. Like as a professional, they're paying you. So why not every time, even in practice, where they just kind of give you an all down, everything good, let's check out, hey, look at that rash, let's check that out.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, on an
Just seems like
organization level, like think of it like, personally, I think the NFL doesn't do a great job of taking care of its athletes, just for the reason of there's so many. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's so many people waiting to take your position.
Those are big investments.
Yeah,
It's
they
like-
can only do so good of a job. Like some of it has to be on the athlete and their camp and stuff. But Division I wrestling, they do a great job, you know, in a lot of programs. And there's definitely more maintenance and care that has to be taken for the wrestling team than, you know.
But I mean, you
the
think if
tennis
it was just integrated into what they did, it's just like, oh, practice is over, I got to go get in line with Doc or whatever.
Yeah,
I
don't know where that doctor comes from though.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Lots of times it's volunteers. That's the
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
So unless you have that relationship with the doctor, you know, like MMA, you know, you're training on your own a lot of times. These gyms, these gyms don't have doctors, the coaches. The gyms are
Right.
trying to stay open. You know, there's not a lot of money in the sport, so it's
And especially after college in an MMA gym, like you're in charge of your own training.
Yeah.
Most gyms though, like especially bigger gyms, have a few members of the gym who are nurses, who are doctors, who are EMTs, and you know they volunteer a lot of their time just because they want to. You know.
And that's it. And it's especially gyms with good jiu-jitsu programs. You just have so many different walks of lives, and you have so many. You know, if you go to a good jiu-jitsu program, you're going to have doctors, and
right.
you know, they get involved and get to know the fighters at the gym, and you know, they'll help out. Like I know, you know, being at some of these, you know, gyms, and you build these relationships, and the coaches know the doctor real well, and you know, can ask them to check out a fight or something's going on. Like I know, you know, I'm 31. I've only had insurance for a few years, so a lot of it was just finding, you know, that jiu-jitsu doctor and be like, am I gonna die? Am I good? Like, what's going on? Do I need to get this fixed? You know.
Sometimes when you first get hurt, you start thinking, what is this going to cost me?
That's it. It's
Yeah. Hey, was it the same time you hurt your elbow that you had a bicep tear?
no. So that
'Cause that was recent.
yeah. The bicep tear was before the 2 fights in one night,
Mm-hmm.
and that was, you know, again another. You know, if I was in a different organization, that's one of those things. Like, I think I'm going to have to reschedule this fight because my bicep's in 2 pieces. But, you know, with the PFL, you just got to go. And I was fortunate that, you know, it wasn't a huge tear. It was a small one. And so, yeah, that was an experience.
So when you tear your bicep, right, it's just like Achilles, which we talked about last week on the podcast. First thing, which is usually pretty easy, is determining, is this a rupture? Did I tear something and pull it off? Or do I have a partial tear? And did I tear it at the myotendinous junction, like where the tendon meets the muscle? Or did I tear the muscle? Or did I tear it where the tendon inserts? You know, did I pluck it off the bone? Where was yours? Was it on the top or the bottom?
I think it was probably
A little
3
ways
inches up.
Yeah.
So hopefully I can recover those photos.
Yeah.
My phone's
Yeah, we'll
got sent back
stick
to
them right
Apple,
in the
so-
podcast when we get them later. So yours was obviously a partial tear, right? Because you didn't have to get it reattached.
Yep.
Did you get an MRI? Is that how you figured out how and where it was torn?
Yeah. So again, thanks for the gym doctors. So Dr. Graham, who's awesome,
Mm-hmm.
he had one of his buddies who does the I don't even know what you call it, the scan. He brought in a computer and a machine into the gym. We went to the back office because
Diagnostic Ultrasound.
Yep.
Probably. Yep.
I know that not a lot of people are able to do it. It's a pretty uncommon
We
thing.
have one I've brought up to Fight Ready a few times. It's great because they're incredibly portable. It's a good field test for injuries like this because, with a good exam, you should be able to tell if it's ruptured or not. Like there's a couple tests called the bicep squeeze test where you just basically you squeeze someone's bicep and see if their hand supinates a little. If it doesn't, that thing's detached, right?
Yeah.
Then there's the hook test, which is basically trying to hook the tendon and see if it's there or not, poking around on it. And then you have to go to either MRI or diagnostic ultrasound. And diagnostic ultrasound is a great one for that because what we can do is it has great resolution like an MRI, but you can get in there and see the location of the tear, swelling around it. And then you can also, the great thing with diagnostic ultrasound that you can't do obviously with MRI is you can mash around on things and look and be like, does this look like it's moving right or not?
Yeah.
So diagnostic ultrasound is great. And I don't want to get it wrong. I took a course this year where they said it has the same resolution or better than an MRI in some cases. The catch is you can't see everything with it. But when it comes to, is this tendon attached or not? Or where is the tear? When it comes to muscles and tendons, rips and tears and soft tissue stuff, it saves a lot of people from needing an MRI, which is nice. Because if you see a small tear and you're confident that it's small and you're going to rehab it, that saves you from, first of all, you get to find out right away. And an MRI can cost you anything from $280 to $800, depending on your situation. And it might take a while to book it. You might not find out for a week. Who's reading the MRI report? We've had a lot of cases in the clinic where I've sent people for MRI and I get the radiologist report back and we have them read it again and you get a different report from another radiologist. So you have to have a radiologist that you trust. And that's something that sports medicine clinics have to do. It's like you don't just send to the big radiology company and have lots of times what they do is they put that MRI in their queue, like say a big, huge company nationwide, and whatever radiologist in the country that works for them, when it's their turn, they read that one. So who knows who's reading your films? And I've seen problems with MRI and even very simple x-rays. Who's reading the film? So when we send people out, we make sure it's one of these two radiologists, sports med radiologists we work with that do it. But that's great that you got to see it with diagnostic ultrasound right there that day.
Yeah.
Then you can get right into the therapy, the appropriate therapy.
Yeah, so I think that's actually how I got linked up with you, was through that injury. Because, let's see, it was Saturday, I finished my sparring, and, I supposed to just relax, and then Saturday night rolled around, and, I can be kind of an anxious person if I'm not sitting around. If I am sitting around, I feel like I'm not doing anything, and I just have I feel the need to go do something. So it was Saturday night, and I went to the gym and just decided I was going to blow out my upper body, and lifted a bunch of weights. And I remember my arm felt weak, and with that wrestling mindset, it's like, oh, I'm weak, I got to make it stronger, and just really, blew out my upper body and my biceps, and was doing a bunch of stupid lifts that had no reason to be doing. And then I was I was sore and I was tired, and my arm it felt kind of funny. And then the next day, woke up, went to church, and it wasn't hurting, but it just felt weak and sore. And then I looked at my bicep, and it was just huge. I had this Popeye arm, and then I had a dent right in it.
Yeah, they actually call it the reverse Popeye sign, right? Because picture if you tear something. A lot of people know when you tear something, the muscle balls up.
Yeah.
And it's actually the orthopedic test for that. It's called the reverse Popeye sign. You have a weird Popeye bicep.
Yeah, it looked like it just got
and
pressed.
Usually a dent. Yeah.
Yep. And then so then I started freaking
out. You were killing it in the gym that day.
Yeah, I was freaking out and talking, trying to figure out what the hell was going on, and then I got Dr. Graham helped me out, and then I went into the gym, and they looked at it, and it was best case scenario for the injury, because I was freaking out, and they were like, what, for a tear, this is absolutely the best way it could happen. Just don't be an idiot. Stop being an idiot. Just train how you're supposed to train. And then I went into the gym, and we're trying to hit pads, and Santino did not want me using my right arm at all, but I wanted to throw it a little bit. And then St. Tino just kicked me out of the gym, and then got your number and sent me over, and that's when I rolled over. And
Yep. So one of the big things with an injury like that is there's the therapy we do in the clinic, right? Ultrasound, laser, massage, lengthening that, that muscle chain.
Yeah.
And but one of the most important things with an injury like that is the athlete remembering all sports injuries. Well, basically anything that heals tightens up, right? So you have a tear to the belly, in the muscle, that's going to heal, right?
Yeah.
And as it heals, everything gets tighter. So now you have to think about the origin and insertion of that muscle, right? So on the proximal end, way up at the shoulder, you got the bicep tendon, which sits right in the bicipital notch with the transverse ligament, and you've got the insertion down on the radius. If you hurt the middle of your bicep and it heals and it tightens up, now you're pulling too hard on the top and bottom. So when we see people who haven't treated it, and they've just kind of dealt with it, is you see they start to have trouble with the front of the shoulder and everything down like around the elbow. So like brachialis, forearm flexors, all that stuff starts to get tight and dysfunctional too. So you end up with you started with a problem in the middle of the muscle and you end up with a problem with the whole thing and attachment problems on the end. When it comes to bicep tears, of course you could do it like picture someone getting an arm bar and hyperextending, right? You could hurt the bicep that way. But most of the research on bicep tears says, I don't mean research, I mean papers, that most of these injuries happen with an elbow at 90 degrees that gets an unexpected extension. So when you think about weightlifting, it's not that the muscle got stretched to the point it tore, it's that the muscle was like halfway, right, 90 degrees, and the force that pulled against it was unexpected. So you're pulling one way, the weight or whatever's pulling the other way, and not at the exact time you were expecting it. So those two things worked against each other and hurt it. I actually know two guys that, different than your bicep tear, they tore the tendon right off at the distal end, like right off the radius. Two guys, same way, they're big. They were both bodybuilder guys who were doing some MMA. So they were bodybuilders first that were striking.
Yeah.
Throw a left hook, catch the end of your bicep on the other guy's elbow and plucked it right off and completely ruptured it. And both of them said it was strange. It didn't even hurt that much. And then they looked at their arm and couldn't move it. And it was like, oh my gosh. And I think of it in terms of like, when you rip open a chicken wing and you see like that nice piece of meat muscle and it turns into the tendon and it touches the bone.
Yeah.
Like you can pull it off, but if you take your thumb and you just press on the tendon, it just pops off.
Yeah.
Same way. Like a more miserable injury than you had, but two dudes, same way, just caught someone's elbow on it. And they had big biceps, right?
Right.
A lot of hypertrophy of the biceps. So that tendon is probably overworked anyway. And all it took was someone's elbow to, hit it and gone.
That happens in bull riding. I saw that a couple times. The dudes holding and that snaps like right there, and then it's balled up.
Yeah, and I would think
then they go right back out
my
there.
uncle has that. He tore his bicep and he never got it repaired or anything.
Bull riding?
No. He's a big muscular dude, and he tore it, and now he just has this. He's still super muscular, and it's just this weird little knot up there, and he swears it's just as strong still. And
so, my good friend Joe from jiu-jitsu, he does like WWE style pro wrestling. He's the strongest person I've ever met. He pulled his bicep off in jiu-jitsu, and they immediately attached it. And he explained that his surgeon said, say 15, and they drill a hole through your ulna, they lace it through, so it's never going to come off again. But he said, years ago, his surgeon was telling him 10, 15 years ago, they were more reluctant to reattach it because it was like, okay, does it hurt a lot? No. Does your arm still work? Yeah. Well, should we really take the risk of doing surgery on it?
Yeah.
Sometimes no, right? But with athletes, and especially now, obviously you just reattach that right away. Let's see. Are we close to break time, you think?
We went through it.
Oh, sweet.
It's all right.
No, it's okay. So here's a good basic rehab protocol for a bicep tear. What you do at home after you're past that inflammatory stage is when you first wake up in the morning, right? That theoretically that bicep should be at its tightest because you've been sleeping and you've been healing all night. So everything is gotten a bit too tight. What you want to do is make a good choice and loosen that thing up first thing in the morning versus walk around with it tight all morning, open the car door, pick up your bag, things like that, and force that thing to loosen up.
Yeah.
So a good protocol to do in the morning is go as soon as you wake up, go right over to the kitchen sink, right? This is when you're in the rehab phase of things. Turn the water on nice and hot, get your bicep under there and heat up the whole thing. Maybe spend 5-8 minutes doing that, especially the attachment down here, and then work some massage on yourself. You don't have to have a massage therapist's hands, right? You can get a lot done on your own. Get some lotion on there, whatever, and try to loosen up that whole bicep and maybe even roll it with something like a foam roller, or people do it with a barbell lots of times, and try to heat. What we tell athletes a lot of times is heat it, then mash it, then stretch it. Okay. So heat first, simple, mash it, then some dynamic stretching, right? Some dynamic movement to loosen everything up, and then static stretching. People like to say static stretching doesn't work, right? But if you look at any yoga person, static stretching apparently works, right? Yeah. It's just hard to prove, clinically. So, but then static stretching in the bicep. So we'll post a good protocol, a good home care protocol for bicep tears on the Busted Fighters Instagram page by the time this comes out. I've
been trying to get on my foam roller every morning. Mm-hmm. So I wish I could say I do it every day. I've been really trying to make it part of my morning routine. Like, I'm real big on like Ben Greenfield. I try to follow him and steal a bunch of his stuff. And so I try to make that a point every day to get on that foam roller. Don't do it every day, but I do try. Right. And that's when I do.
5 days out of 7 is pretty good.
Yeah. When I'm consistent with it, like I feel great. It's definitely like he talks about the importance of getting sun, and so. And the first thing in the morning, and so I have a foam roller in my backyard. Mm-hmm. I try to get out there and do that, and when I do, I feel awesome. Mm-hmm. And it definitely, when I stay in that, it translates to other things in my life. I'm definitely way more productive when I kick off my day with that sunshine and foam roller in the backyard. Yeah.
That's great. And obviously, daily maintenance of everything. You got, if you're training hard, you got to spend. God, it depends on your age, but you got to spend at least a half an hour every day. What we call prehab. Yep. Treating things that aren't even broken yet. It's a good investment.
Yeah, when the season gets close and I'm back to that full-blown training, that's something I'm going to have to do. Because now it's actually easy. So, I do probably get it about 5 days out of the week, I'd say. Mm-hmm. Maybe, where I get out there and I do my morning routine and whatnot. But then, when the training gets super hard and intense and I'm driving out to Scottsdale twice a day, and then I start sleeping in, and so I'm gonna have to really make it a point to do that prehab, and not wait until my biceps hanging off and I get kicked out of the gym, and
hit it on the front end. You had some trouble with your neck this year too, right?
Yeah, I've had a lot of trouble with my neck. I think all wrestlers do. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things. I wish I could go back in time and actually treated myself and knew, accepted that there was a problem, and not just ignored it, because the neck problem started in high school, and I'm 31, and so it's just kind of one of those things. Wrestlers just you get stingers, and that's just that's it. You get a couple minutes to sit there and cry, but then you're right back in the wrestling room, and it doesn't matter how beat up your neck is or how bad you feel. You just kind of get through it, and so. Back to, the PFL season, it's brutal, because you have those 5 fights and, such a short amount of time. So it was, without you guys working on me, I probably would have, died. It was killing me.
Maybe a little more damage. But you mentioned stingers, right? And when we say stingers, often people think of football immediately, but wrestling too. And a stinger is actually, they call it a neuropraxia, right? Basically a tractioning of the nerve, and causing that problem. Sort of the new standard that they applied to football players is, if you get a stinger, okay, that's one thing. If you get a second one, like in the same season, the new standard is take an X-ray of the cervical spine. Actually, let me correct myself. An X-ray is good, but the real standard is getting an MRI, because what we want to look at is the diameter of your spinal canal. Because if someone's had more than one stinger, it could be indicative that they have stenosis of that canal, which of course leads them prone to much worse injury. Now they were just doing an X-ray to do that, but then they actually found we have to think about the soft tissues inside the spinal canal too. So now the standard is to get an MRI and make sure you don't have stenosis of that canal, because stingers shouldn't be that common. And once you have 2 or 3 of them, and we meet a lot of high school football players with multiple stingers in a season, and just like concussions is the kind of thing that people used to just deal with, but now people are taking it a lot more serious.
Yeah. I mean, they're bad. I mean, they'll mess you up like a concussion. I mean, if you hit your head the wrong way, like, I mean, that sounds like a concussion. But if you
it's like picture like head and shoulder into the mat at the same time.
Yep. I mean, you see stars and almost black out, and it's.
I've never suffered one of those, but I've heard enough about it that that's enough for me.
Yeah. Maybe that just is a concussion. I just.
That's not the kind of thing you're supposed to figure out on your own.
Yeah.
One thing we were talking about last week with like Division I college wrestling and neck, right? Because they rank injuries in order. You know, the NCAA does, like, what injuries have gotten reported. And the thing with wrestling is this, like, they're reporting the injuries now, acute injuries. Of course, they can't really take into account chronic, right? And how things are going to be later. So when you deal with wrestlers and you think about the number one injury over time from a chronic standpoint, there's no real way to gather that data, but I'd have to give it to degeneration of the lower neck, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the thing you expect to see with lifelong wrestling or wrestlers that then compete in grappling and jiu-jitsu or MMA is, you know, our necks degenerate, everyone's does, and it's usually the lower neck, C5, 6, 7. That's where you see disc bulges, disc degeneration, herniations, and sequestered discs all the time. We're actually going to do a podcast next week with my coach, Augusto Tanquino Mendez, and we're going to talk specifically about that. So I won't really get into that, but as far as wrestlers go, that's the thing you think about with a career of wrestling is degeneration of the lower neck. And it's the kind of thing that you could be treating from the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, number one, with diagnostic testing and seeing what's there and not treating every neck like it's a sprained neck, but also some things like daily or 3 or 4 times a week traction that you can do at home, and some things that can be implemented to keep you healthy and maintain this, you know, as you go on through your career if you're going to wrestle for 20 years, you know. I think especially with the NCAA, they're considering that 4-year time period, you know. Yeah. And they can't really account for, like, who's going to be doing this for 15 years later. You know?
That neck sling that you put me on, that you hooked to the doorknob, if any wrestlers, any athletes are listening that have neck issues,
or non-athletes.
What was it?
It's pretty good. So they make this thing, and there's a bunch of different people who make it, but it's called the Neck Hammock, right? And I first saw it like on Instagram, and I was like, that makes a lot of sense to me, because we have a decompression table at the office, a big, expensive neck traction machine, right, that does different computerized protocols for different things and stuff. But necks do good with regular old traction too, right? So the Neck Hammock's pretty good, and it's got like this basket your head sits in. But the trouble with it is some heads slip out of it easy, some don't. It's hard to get the angle right. Basically, you could go home, tie it to your doorknob, and try to figure out the right angle. Or, like, say someone who's petite, like a smaller female, they have trouble with it because they're just tiny and their heads tend to slip out, you know, and they're not heavy like us where we can kind of anchor ourselves to the floor. We did figure out up at the clinic that what I was doing is I was buying neck hammocks and then separately purchasing a medical head traction harness, right, which are only like $25 for medical traction units. And I put those two things together, and that seems to work better because that harness kind of grabs you under your chin and takes it. Now, if you're a wrestler with a hurt neck, I wouldn't just jump into one. First, you want to figure out, okay, what's going on with your neck? But then also, you're getting other therapies and figuring out if traction is good for you or not. Because first day you put someone in traction, like almost no matter what's going on, you want to put them in for 5 minutes, because what if they get incredibly sore? You know, some people can lay in that thing for 20, 25 minutes and just more feels better, but you've got to be careful. So, but those neck hammocks are good. Neck hammock with that special piece seems to be great. And that works out well. Yeah. So with wrestlers especially, and that chronic degeneration of the lower neck, and we're thinking about the discs a lot. The way people lots of times explain a disc is like a jelly donut, right? And they say, you got a jelly donut, and if you squish it, the jelly squirts out of the donut, and that's not good. But if you're tractioning or decompressing the neck, you can pull that jelly in to some degree, right? Okay. I like to say a disc, you know, like a lumbar disc is like a dried apricot, right? It's tough on the outside, but you can tell there's some squishiness inside. Picture like a dried apricot, but with more jelly inside, right? Now, cervical disc is much smaller, but it's still a decent analogy. Now, if you think about the forces that hurt a wrestler or a grappler in their discs, a lot of times there's some confusion when people who do jiu-jitsu or whatever have a disc issue and they see their doctor that might not be really familiar with the sport. They just explain, I get choked all the time, and they think, okay, you're getting choked and neck cranked a lot, and that's what's hurting the disc. But which can absolutely happen. But usually with a wrestler, what we're dealing with is a lot of compressive forces on those discs. So when you think about someone shooting in and getting stuffed, compressive force on the top of the head, forehead or top of the head, or shooting in, like if you like a smash double leg, right? You're doing that to yourself, and that could do it too. Or posting on your head and turning. So another way people like to explain discs is think of like a water balloon, right? If you smash a water balloon straight, like you might break it, but it does pretty good.
Yeah.
If you twist a water balloon, that seems to break it a little easier, right? If you compress and twist a water balloon, that's going to break it, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about someone posting on their head and turning, or getting stuffed and turning, when you add compression and rotation together on a disc, it's bad news.
Yeah.
And when you think about wrestling, that's what you think about. Like it's the mechanism of injury that makes it such a horrible and horrible thing for your neck.
The last stinger I had, it's funny to say, I think I was doing a round with Dan Moret, who's like a lightweight, but he's like the world's biggest lightweight. He's huge. And we were sparring outside of the cage, and I took a shot, and I ran into the wall. It was a padded wall, but I hit right on top of my head, and just probably with a little bit of an angle.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like instant, saw black, like, seeing stars. And there was like a second where I was like, I broke my neck, and then I like had to stop and realize I was gonna live, and I wasn't paralyzed. But yeah, I thought that was it.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Take a little breather here.
I did that a couple times of snowboarding before wearing helmets, and actually when I was younger, when I catch an edge and just eat shit, I finally started wearing helmets and stuff. And even one of my worst wipeouts was I caught the back edge and I went this way and my whole body went. Thankfully, I was wearing a helmet, but same thing, checking my toes all the way up, just going, oh fuck, I'm probably dead.
Yeah.
Am I okay? Matt, any big neck injuries for you?
No, I never had to deal with that.
That's good.
Those things scare me, though.
Mm-hmm.
Like how you're talking about wrestlers and stuff, man. You guys, it's amazing how the body can sustain that, in my opinion. But I haven't had an injury like that.
And yeah, just not to throw anyone under the bus, but when you're, I'm from the Midwest, and that Iowa style, it's like all.
Mm-hmm.
It's the whole idea is just being tough is what is going to win, just be tough. And so it's like you just ignore everything and, and then, kind of growing up in the program that I did, it's like, so many guys did such incredible things with insane injuries, and it's like that's what you aspire to be like. You like, guys winning national titles with blown out knees and just like all these, So
it's almost like a better story, though. It's like,
right.
I won the national championship with a broken arm.
Right.
Yeah,
so what are you doing?
So they actually that's like looked at as like, wow, that's awesome over there.
Yeah.
And that culture in Iowa.
It's like,
right?
you just you just be tough.
Yeah.
You're not really hurt. You're supposed to push through.
Right.
And
I think one thing that keeps coming up that we've learned in the podcast we've done so far is like with MMA and wrestling, it's important to be tough in the event, in the mat or in the cage, on the mat or in the cage. But then when you come off the mat, it's not a matter of not being tough, but a matter of being attentive.
Yeah.
Because if you're gonna go that hard, you gotta maintain these things. After it's more work. It's more work than a lot of other sports. Yep. All right, George, is there anything you can think of that you want to cover that we haven't really hit on yet? When we wrap it up, I'll do your Instagram and stuff like that.
What's your side hustle that you were talking about?
Oh, the hot dogs we still
yeah.
right now.
I think he's gonna leave that out. I think.
Okay.
We can cut it out.
Yeah, when we pick back up, I think probably, like I said, I was like thinking how I can actually contribute and to this. And for me, kind of, if there's any other athletes that kind of suffer from that guilt of getting treatment, you gotta. Yep. I can't tell you how to get past it, but you gotta take care of yourself. And back to kind of that.
We'll get into that next. Yeah.
That Midwest mentality is you're not hurt. You can keep going, and if you want to do this as a profession and make money, you better get past that way of thinking and start taking care of yourself.
All right. Good deal. Well, I think we've done a good hour here, so I'm gonna pick up with that, and then we'll wrap it up with your Instagrams and stuff.
Yep. Sweet.
Can you guys think of anything else? No? Okay.
No, it's pretty good.
All right. So Jordan, you mentioned earlier that you'd feel guilt for getting treatment, right? And one thing we see a lot in the clinic is athletes that of all types that they should be coming in once a week or so and just getting an hour of massage and muscle work and stretching. And I'm guilty of this too, is I'll wait 2-3 weeks and then it's more work to fix. But part of it is when I'm laying on that massage therapist or therapist table, at 1:00 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, I feel a little guilty. It's like, I could be getting this done. I should be getting that done. Yeah. My wife's at work, the kids are at school, and here I am having someone rub my calf. You've mentioned a few times that the thing that you really think you could have done a better job of, when you were younger and stuff, is getting that treatment, right?
Yeah, and I think it just goes to growing up in wrestling. I'm from the Midwest, and kind of that Midwest mentality in wrestling is, be tough. You're not hurt. Keep going. You see, older guys do these incredible things, win national tournaments, and turns out they had this insane injury. I think, Jordan Burroughs won the world championships with a broken foot, or maybe it was the Olympics, broken foot, and didn't disclose it, until afterwards. So it's it kind of gets put in your head that you just gotta work through it. You gotta, if you admit, if you say you have an injury, you admit you have an injury, you're admitting you're weak, or and so it's kind of
really, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to work through it.
Yeah,
you're not announcing it to everybody, but you can announce it to yourself.
Yeah,
well, your opponent can focus on that too.
Right.
And so, for me personally, I think, especially, and I've talked about I feel like I had my failures in, wrestling. I wish I would have done better. And so when I decided to fight, I really tried to embrace this, the mentality that I thought I should have had when I was, younger, even more so. And so it was for me, that was just, outwork everyone, work hard, do as much as possible, work as hard as I possibly can. And so, when I started coming and getting my treatment, I live in Gilbert, I drive to Scottsdale, I go train in Mesa, I come to you in Tempe, and it's you're, bouncing around, and I'm trying to figure out how I can get as much done in a day. So some of those sessions I would have to, cancel, or not cancel, but be okay, do strength and conditioning straight after practice, and then I have my night where I'd come see you and get worked on, and it's I would feel guilty because it's I feel like I need to be in the gym right now. I need to be, running. I need to be doing
or
some
home
pull-ups.
with your little boy.
Yeah. And it's so, I definitely had this kind of guilt where I need to work harder. And especially when I first started to come see you, it's I get some work done, and again, I would feel guilty. And it's I would end up going, I'd go get on the airdyne in my backyard when it's that's the worst thing I could do. And because I just need a rest and just go to bed. And, if there's definitely a balance. You don't want to just pamper yourself all the time, but you do, if you want to do this professionally at a high level, you have to make the time to take care of yourself, and you have to, you got to take care of yourself, and you can't just try to have that I'm going to tough through this mentality, and, it's okay to actually relax. And
well, it's almost like you beat yourself up for feeling good.
Yeah.
And
I think that's exactly it. It's supposed to, back to the Midwest wrestling, you talk about the grind. And you talk about, high-level fighters and wrestlers that come from wrestling, you talk about the grind, embrace the grind. And it's you almost want to feel like shit because that means you're working hard.
After a hard day, you feel good when you go home and you're tenderized from head to toe.
And it's so
you worked hard, whether it's on the wrestling mat or working on a farm. You know what I mean? End of the day, you're beat. You put something in.
Yeah. And I think that's it. So then when I would, I got better at it towards the end.
You're like, I feel too good. I didn't work hard enough.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And you gotta break away from that. Again, don't go too far where all you want to do is, I was talking when we weren't recording, like when I was younger, I'd go to some of these camps and I see some of these older guys and they'd be doing, a lot of work on themselves, and it's like, yeah, it might be a little too much, but then sometimes it's like, well, it makes sense. They've been in the sport for a long time, and they understand you got to take care of yourself. Like, you can't run, full steam hot all the time. You're gonna.
And that's something that over these last few podcasts, we're hearing a lot of the pro fighters say over and over again: maintenance.
Yep.
Prehab, prevention.
Yep.
Yep. So PFL season 3, it's supposed to start in May. What are your goals for the season?
Win that tournament, get that belt.
Exactly.
So.
All right, that'll do it for today. Big thank you to Jordan Big Swingin' Johnson. Look for him in the next PFL season in 2021. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Dark Horse Lionheart and 48 Real Estate, the Beard Estate agents. And of course, you can find me easy enough at Dr. Matt Colby. See you next time.